Hey guys. Okay, so pretty much like Class A, I feel like there's going to be a lot I have to talk about with this chapter. First off, before I get into the details of what happened, Horikoshi, how dare you leave my man Kirishima out of this shit, bro? Like, seriously, what are you. Seriously, bro, that is an offense to Kirishima. You better fix this, dude. You better fix this next week, dude. I'm just saying, like, give something for my man Kirishima already. I'm just saying. Okay, just that aside, okay. First off, but getting into it, continuing from the previous chapter, I love how in the same vein of that chapter focusing on Class A's attempts to convince Izuku through their words and through them just reminiscing on their time together. This one was focused on disproving everything Izuku had said and believed through Class A's actions, while at the same time still doing it in a way where it works off what happened in the previous chapter. Because even though they probably even though the interesting thing about how this chapter and last week's chapter work so perfectly together is even though Class A probably could have worn him down eventually and outmaneuvered him like they did in this chapter, there's no guarantee that if that's all they did that it would have changed anything, and that Izuku would have Izuku probably would have just been more stubborn. But because they did take that time in the previous chapter to really get in his face and tell him how they really feel, it was chipping away at those emotional barriers that Izuku was putting up piece by piece. So when we get to this point where they collectively work together and pretty much proved that Izuku isn't as invincible or as fast as he claimed to be, and that they can keep up with him just as easily as he can keep up with them. Even it really it all perfectly set Izuku in a position where he has no choice now but to at least accept some manner of help now. And Ida was the perfect cherry on top to that, because what he said, throwing the exact words Izuku had told him when they were up against Stain back at his face, those in some ways were not only the exact words Izuku needed to hear, but Ida was Ida was the only one who could deliver them, or in general, they were the only words I think that could even reach Izuku to begin with. As as I as really aside from Shoto, Ida is really the only one who understands what it means in order to lose your way completely. And Izuku, and because Ida was the one who told him that, it Izuku is now fully the emotional barriers are gone now. And yeah, as you know what, it's funny, even when it comes to how everyone each contributed to and worked together in order to take Izuku down, or just reach him, I guess you could say. I kind of even have to give credit where it's due to the pervy little grape idiot. Mineta was kind of putting in work. I gotta admit that much. Now, with that said, there are aspects to this chapter where I can see people growing concerned about character regression on Izuku's part after reading it, but at the same time, I don't think we're going for full character regression either. I think the point we've reached with Izuku's character after this chapter is he's going back towards being more open towards people and willing to accept help like he did before. But I think the more reserved part of Izuku is still going to that we've seen up to this point is still going to remain. If for me personally, if the thing people are concerned about is going back to the Izuku who basically cries waterfalls, I think it's fair to say we've basically long moved past that point of Izuku's character. The Izuku I think we're seeing now, he is definitely still going to remain a very reserved individual, and it changed, and not as hope and not as happy-go-lucky, or at least not until this whole thing is over. But I think we are still going to, we're at least going to get a semblance, some semblance of the old Izuku. Not a full regression, but enough that's recognizable. With that said, the other concern I saw people have is that there are some people who actively don't even want Izuku to accept Class A's help and to continue to go it alone. And don't get me wrong, I can definitely see the appeal of that. But the problem is, in terms of this particular arc, and honestly, even from the natural progression of where the story should go next, we kind of hit a bit of a wall where narratively, I'm seeing there's only so much Horikoshi can do before he hits the wall of repetition. So some people might not like it, but this shakeup was needed in order to avoid a little bit of repetition, honestly, because Izuku going it alone, I think for Horikoshi, Izuku going it alone would have just meant the same thing of trying to keep up with All for One and failing each time. I think that like the point he was trying to get across with this arc is that whether we like it or not, Izuku can, even despite Izuku's power, it's not enough alone. He still does need help. Honestly, if I did have any problem with this chapter though, I would say that despite Ochiko having a pretty heavy role to play in this chapter, somehow I wanted more. Like that's the weird thing about Ochiko in this chapter. Even though she had a very heavy role to play in helping everyone, just kind of in helping everyone, and especially Ida, like pretty much catch up to Izuku, it still didn't feel like it was enough. I don't know. It's with Ochiko, it's always weird for me. With that said, I've been keeping this kind of locked away for a while, but there's been certain expectations that have been swirling around in my head, like pretty much ever since this whole battle between Izuku and Class A began, in terms of what happens afterwards. And honestly, part of me is really hoping that whether it's in person or by hologram, that All for One appears before Class 1A like he did for Izuku, just being his condescending, cocky self. Because even though they might not share as much of an emotionally driven connection to him as Izuku and All might do, just imagine the conversation between these two opposing forces, Class 1A and All for One. It's one of those things that really has me excited just from the possibilities and what that scenario would be like, where they just have a conversation, like a very confrontational conversation, mind you, but a conversation nonetheless. But I don't know if that's exactly what Horikoshi's gonna do. Just something on my personal wish list for either like next week's chapter or the chapter after that. Although I think the latter is gonna be delayed by another Shonen Jump break. But yeah, it's one of those things where I want to see that kind of thing happen. Aside from that though, like as I said before, Horikoshi, seriously, why did you do my man? I know I said it before, but I gotta say it again. Seriously, why'd you do my man Kirishima like that? Like, but by the time he gets back, the whole thing is going to be resolved. Like, he's going to be too late to do or say anything. Like, let my man get a word in, for God's sakes. Like, I'm sorry, it's hilarious, but at the same time, it's like, give my man Kirishima something to work with here, bro. I'm just saying. Like, yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Analyst, Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, and just share the video around, guys. Death Knight of Anime, signing off. Later.